Welcome to our show, everybody. And we have the wonderful, extraordinarily gifted medium, Denise Ramon.
Hi, how are you?
A drum roll or something.
Oh.
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, doing
Excellent.
really good. Yeah.
And our boy Erik. Hi, sweetie.
He says, "Hi, Mom." He says, it's almost like he's stretching, like he just woke up from a nap. And he says he's making fun of me because I laid down for an hour. But he says, hi. He's wearing yellow too. I just noticed you're wearing yellow. He's wearing a yellow shirt. But he says, hi. He says, I love you.
I love you.
He's showing me like he just got a haircut. That's so funny.
That's so weird. Hey, so you're going to watch over your little nephew, Liam, right? He's really sick with RSV. He's only 4 months old, so.
He says, yeah, I just got chills. He says, yes. He said, he's going to be fine. He's telling me that he said he's showing me he's already got his hands. And I feel like when his hands, his energy involved with him. Already working on him. Yes. He says yes, and I'm saying good. I'm like asking him, how are you doing that? And he's just showing me the energy is in there. He's helping him. Yeah. So he's going to be, he says he's going to be okay. I feel like he's going to get all of a sudden just over it.
Oh, good.
The way, yeah. So good.
Pretty usual. That's cool. All right, I wanted to talk about two things, so we'll probably just do it in two short YouTubes.
Okay.
This one is kind of a biggie, at least in the Western culture, is weight loss. So many of us are overweight. I will show you here. Look at this. Look, people. No, it's got to go. I know it's because I'm old, but whatever.
You're tiny. The
amount of exercise will get rid of that. Anyway. As long as people don't say, oh, what do you do? Then that's okay. But Erik, what's going on? Why are so many of us overweight? And what can we do about it?
Erik says the number one is emotions.
Ooh.
He says emotions, he's telling me emotions, and I'm real fascinated because I want to lose some more also. He's telling me emotions dictate, and he's saying, and not for all, but for a good portion of us, dictate what we put on our plates and how much we put in our mouth. And sometimes our emotions will, whatever it is going on, how it releases chemicals and stuff, what it does to us dictates on what we crave and what we want to eat. It like the sweets. And he says, some people crave salts, but the bottom line is it's the carbs which turn to sugar. So it doesn't matter if you're a salt or a sugar, the end result is the sugar.
So what hormones are we talking, what chemicals and what emotions? Let's start out with that. What emotions are we talking about? Is it like stress?
He says stress is a big one. He says stress is a big one. Stress, he says stress raises our cortisol.
Oh, yeah, that's so true.
So, okay, and he's telling me it raises that. And then that, he goes, in itself just throws us off. And then we go into that, and then we go into eating. He says, then we eat because we want to. He says, we don't think of it as we're wanting to bring ourselves down, but we're trying to lower that, he's saying. And he says, there, something about the pituitary gland also from the cortisol. I don't know what he means by that. There's something that it affects that, but it also affects our hormones and how we break down sugars and break down components of foods. But he says we just all of a sudden just start craving things like sugar. We want to eat. We start eating stuff because that's, he says, our body but that's not what our body is wanting, really. Our body is wanting some type of protein, he says, or vegetables. He says, and exercise is so important. Exercise. But we grab, he says, but we have everything so prepackaged. And he showed me, like, there's vending machines everywhere and we can just get, and he says, we unconsciously eat.
And there's signs and signals everywhere saying you need to eat, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to eat more, more, and more. But is dopamine involved? Because that's kind of like the reward, neurotransmitter.
He says yes, but he says on some things, it's also, like we get like a reward. He says, like, people who smoke cigarettes say, okay, after I finish doing this project or finish cleaning this house or washing this car, I'm gonna go smoke a cigarette. People do the same thing with food. They're like, okay, and it's kind of like a reward that they're rewarding themselves with, but they're not. But when they're eating, they're unconsciously eating, he's telling me. He says we need to be more conscious of, like, what are we putting in our hand? Why are we eating this? Are we hungry? Because he said the majority of us eat when we're not hungry.
Yeah. And fasting, I mean, really low calorie diets are very common in these places where the people live to be 120 or whatever. I don't want to do that, though. But I guess a lot of people do it to soothe themselves, like to pacify themselves.
Yes. He says sugar is a very powerful drug, he's saying, and when he's saying that, he's showing me white sugar is what he's showing me, the white sugar. He says it's a very powerful drug, and when he's saying that, when I used to eat sugar, I would get like a high from it, and then a crash. But he's telling me, and he's saying, yes, people get the same thing. It kind of soothes them for a few, 5-10 minutes while they're eating it. And that's why they continue to eat more and more, because they're wanting that same feel. They want to feel good. And then the next thing you know, they've expanded 3 or 4 sizes. And then they get to a place where they're depressed, and then they just keep eating to feel better. And he's talking about the people where you said that eat very low calorie and fast. He says, our bodies do not require as much food as these places serve you. And he's showing me plates of, like, in a restaurant, and he says that's enough for 5 people.
Yeah, I always see. I love it when I went to Chuck E. Cheese one time with the kids when they were little. They had the salad bar. Oh, you can eat. And these very obese people were eating, but they had this. The salad was just the plate was huge with potato salad and all that kind of stuff. They probably thought they were doing themselves a favor. But when my Norwegian relatives come over here, they are shocked by the portion sizes given by restaurants. Just crazy.
Yes, he's telling me that people in Europe eat breads and pastas and rice and stuff like that, but you don't see that type of obesity over there, because one, he says it's very fresh, it's not prepackaged, and he says, and the portion size is what we use for an appetizer. He says even our appetizers are big, and but he says, yes, he's telling me how your relatives, when they come over from Norway, they're thinking, oh my God, it's like, he says those people feel like we're killing ourselves with the amount of food that we eat.
Yeah, because we are.
Yeah, he said literally we are. He says.
So if we decrease the amount we eat little by little, because we're so used to these big portion sizes that we get really hungry if we don't have those same sizes. So I guess if we just slowly decrease to having just very small portions, then that.
Well, he says, it's all in our thoughts that we think we're hungry, because we ought to, he said, and he's showing me, which I've heard this before. He says, put your food on a smaller plate and fill the plate up, because you're telling your mind you got a full plate of food. And he says, there's ways to do this. He goes, but he says, he says there's a lot of controversy on how to eat, what not to eat, and this and that. And he's saying he's not up for a debate on how one should eat and how one not should eat. And I feel, and when he says that, he's saying you do what's right for you. And when he's saying that, he's not saying, he's referring to like vegetarian, vegan, and meat eater or however, because he's showing me, like, if you want to eat meatloaf and mashed potatoes, just use smaller sizes and do a smaller plate. If you're vegetarian, he says, do smaller sizes. And when he says that, because I know several vegetarians, and I call them junketarians, because they are not healthy eaters.
Oh. A lot
No.
of the I see in health food stores look awful, like waxy and yellow. But my sister had been a vegetarian since she was a little girl. And I guess a couple of years ago, she said, I want a side of beef, man. And so she started eating meat and felt a lot better.
Yeah, he said, and when because he says it's all about nutrition, and you have to have a balance, and he's of whatever it is, however you eat. Because he's telling me, you can eat a lot of bread, or he says there's a lot of vegetarian cookies, a lot of vegan cookies, a lot of vegan bread, so it's how he goes, it's eating. And he says there is some truth about eating like the colors of the rainbow. He's telling me, because of having colorful food on your plate, and he says he says a lot of us feel like we either have to eat one way or another way. And he says, just start making smaller portions of what you're already eating.
Rainbow, I never heard of that. So I'm supposed to eat M&Ms. Skittles for breakfast.
He was doing Skittles.
Oh, yeah, I figured. He loves Skittles.
Did he? Yeah, he was doing Skittles. But so yeah, and he says it's, and think about why he says think about why you're eating, like he says a lot of people eat to cover up pain. A lot of pain. Cover up pain.
Oh, cover up pain. Oh, wow.
Yes. He says that's a big and he says in the industry knows that.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to vegetarianism and stuff. I remember somebody asked me to ask you, Eric, a long time ago, isn't it better to be a vegetarian? Isn't that kinder? Eating things that don't have space. But you said that every soul is equally valued, whether it's broccoli soul or a cow soul, and that you just have to humanely raise and kill them and be grateful for it. Are you still backing that up?
He said yes, and he said yes, because he's saying, and when you ask that, he says, because he's saying, Denise, you can communicate to plants, because plants talk.
Oh yeah.
And animals talk, and he says this is a big controversy though, because one side has their pros and cons about it, as to the beef side, the vegetarian side, the vegan side, and he says go with what feels right for you.
Exactly.
And he says, and don't try to convert anybody to eating beef. Don't try to convert anybody, to your ways. Do what feels right for you. He says there is truth to raising animals humanely and doing it like that. He goes, there is a difference. And he says he's telling me there's a difference in taste in the meat. And that
stress hormones and stuff, and those who are just, oh God, I don't want to think about it.
Yeah, but he says, do what's right for you, not what you read for everybody. He says there's nothing wrong with educating yourself, but make your best decision is based on what you feel inside. Just follow what's inside of you.
Follow your intuition. By the way, you guys get a pen and paper and write this down. You need to go to YouTube and watch The Secret Life of Plants. It's really old. I think it's from the 70s, but they show all sorts of experiments that prove that plants do have emotions. They do have a consciousness, and it's really fascinating. You will be shocked. It'll make you wonder whether, oh my God, do I want to eat this asparagus?
Well, they do. You know, I had a tree tell me driving home, I was like, oh my God, look at that tree. It's so beautiful, because it was a real old tree here near where I live. And it said to me, yes, but what really, I look okay from the outside, but when they put that fertilizer on me, it just really hurts me from the inside. And I was like, oh, and it was like, use natural fertilizer instead of the synthetic kind, you know, and so, yeah, I got real weird then about that, using Miracle Grow and stuff.
Okay, so Erik asked my knockout roses what's wrong with them. They were so beautiful, but now
He says there's a fungus on it. There's a fungus, and there's a fungus, and I feel like the fungus is, well, obviously he's kind of making fun of me. The fungus is at the roots. There's a fungus in there. He says, turn the dirt around or something, and it needs to be, yeah, irrigated. He's showing me, and just there's something that needs to be sprinkled in there for fungus.
Okay.
That's what he's saying. He says, and then they'll bloom. That's what he's telling me.
Now, one thing I keep meaning to say is on the carbohydrate thing. One thing as a doctor, I will say, is that when you eat a carb, you know, of course, you want to eat less of them. You should always have a protein with it. Otherwise, what happens is you eat like crackers, and then the insulin surges out of your pancreas, pew, real high, and then it crashes down. And when insulin goes up, insulin takes that carb, you know, and puts it in, it creates fatty acids and puts fat into the cells. It's complicated, but anyway. But if you take a, you know, the cheese with it, like a protein, then that will blunt the insulin spike, and it will just be more modulated, basically. Just wanted you to know that. All right,
yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, he's saying, yeah, he says, because you have to have both. You have to have both to work like they're supposed to work.
Are there any diets that are, what about like, that are better than others? I know we kind of talked about this, but like the paleo diet, I know we should get away from all processed food because that can make us gain weight. But for weight loss, what's a good diet?
Well, you say paleo because that's what I eat, and so I'm interested to hear what he says about that. Yeah, I've been eating paleo for almost 4 years now.
You feel better?
Oh, yes.
Whoa.
Yeah. I always say Jesus healed me because I was such a sugar freak before. Whoa. And it's just been effortless for me. He says, I'm interested because I need to lose some weight, so I'm interested to hear it. He says paleo, he's telling me to shut up. He says the paleo is good. He says for people that can do it, you know. He says, he's telling me that, have you read about it? Because he's telling me that you, I don't know, like, or maybe he's just saying that because some doctors did a lot of research on it, and he's shown me how you would be able to relate to it and understand about it. But he's saying, you know, the paleo diet is good. He goes, but then again, you have to watch that too, because you can eat too. He says, you know, he says there's going to be controversy with that because people are about, because how they eat, because they eat organs and stuff like that. How they say, I don't do that, but I can't do that. And
I can't do that when
but
you
he, yeah, I can't eat the organs. But he's saying that it's all about portion. You know, you have to the portion control, and you have to. It's all about portion, and the way he showed me that, because there are some things in that diet that can cause you to be overweight, and like he's showing me nuts. You know, you can eat an awful lot of nuts,
yeah, they
and
can be very high calorie.
yes, very much so. So
Yeah.
he says it's about portion. He says, you know, um, he says that's more of a, but he says anything you get on needs to be not a diet, but more of a way of life to eat.
Yeah.
And so not like get on it for 5 or 6 months and then get off of it. He says, because then you're going to throw that weight on even more, because your body, it's like this army is in your body going, oh my God, we're getting this stuff we're used to. And then they're all like clawing at you. And then you continuously eat more. And then next thing you know, you put on the 50 plus the 20 more pounds
Oh,
in a short period of time. He said, that's why it's all about portion, you know, whatever it is, it's portion, you know.
Can you tell us what a paleo diet is? Can you tell the viewers?
It is, paleo diet is no sugar, no dairy, no grains, and no legumes. So it's just,
simple.
yeah, and there's some fruit, not all fruit, because a lot of fruit is a lot of sugar.
I know, because I went on a jumping kick a long time ago, and I gained like 5 pounds in 1 week.
Yeah, there's berries, but the thing of it is eat what's in season. When our bodies are not meant to, Eric goes, get on your soapbox, but we're not meant to eat blueberries off season and then we get them from other places. Eat what's local and in season.
Okay.
And then of course, I don't eat white potatoes because it's very starchy, and it's and then meat. I am not a big meat eater, and I don't eat seafood.
Mm-hmm.
So I eat chicken breast and I eat some turkey.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's it. But that's it.
All
And
right.
but you can have almond butter. You can make things and stuff. But yeah, that's what I eat.
Okay. Do you think it's better for us to eat like we did when we were cave people, just kind of like graze, maybe eat small little things six times a day or more, instead of 3, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Eric is saying yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. He says because our bodies, and he's showing me our anatomy, our bodies are not meant to digest large amounts of food.
Yeah.
We never fully digest everything. And that, he says, this is the reason why a lot of people end up with digestive issues, because well, of course the emotions, but the amount of food. He says, and that's why he says the people in Europe, they eat small portions. He's showing me, like, they understand it. But yes, they eat small portions of food
So that's
6 times a day.
that's the biggie. That's the big lesson in this. Do diet drinks cause weight gain? I mean, that's
He says yes, because and I'm asking, he's saying yes because he says what it does is it sends a message to our brain saying we're intaking a sugar drink.
Okay.
So it's our body, our metabolism in our body is responding to that in the same manner. But he says, but in addition to that, our body is also being gravely affected, and this is his word, gravely affected by all the chemicals that are in a diet drink.
Well, I hear that, when they store these, like Diet Coke and stuff in warehouses, they get heated up, that they produce, I don't know if it's trace amounts, but formaldehyde, and that can't be good.
He said it's true. And he's showing me there's something also too.
Die. Maybe.
And he's also telling me there's also a chemical reaction with that and the aluminum that they're stored in. And then also, and I'm asking him, is it with plastic too? He goes, not as much with plastic, but with the aluminum with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he says that's why he goes, and they know, they're smart. He says because they know people are getting a little leery of that aspartame in that. So now they're going to the, what is it, the stevia.
Oh yeah, is that better? Is that?
He says you have to be careful where you're getting it from. You know, where it's from. You know, it's kind of like sugar. You know, sugar is not bad for you, but it's what the sugar. You know, it's like, are you getting it in its raw form or? And he says, you know, just you have to be very mindful of that because it is a processed, and you have to know where you're getting it from.
Okay. So what is the best sugar to have? Like fructose or sugar in the raw or brown sugar? I mean, what do we do? Cane sugar?
He says, you know, in moderation. He's showing me sugar in the raw, which is that brown sugar, honey.
Yeah, honey.
And he says that agave or gava or something he's showing me.
Oh yeah. See, yeah, that's right.
He goes cane sugar, but you know, again, you have to use that in moderation. He says we don't need to have everything so sweet.
Okay. What about skipping breakfast? Does that cause you to gain weight? Or does it not have much effect?
Erik says that doesn't cause you to gain weight, but it does cause you to eat more later.
Oh, I see.
But he says,
it didn't lower your metabolism.
He says, not the way people think, but he says, when you have breakfast, he says, you can have an apple.
Yeah.
And some nuts. It doesn't have to be, well, and of course, he's showing me a big thing of pancakes. Yeah. But he says, you can have some, he says, you can even grab some nuts or an apple or a tomato, he's saying, or something quick, you know, or a hard-boiled egg, or I'm assuming it's hard because he's showing me the egg, or he's showing me avocado. He says avocados are really good for you in so many ways, your skin, your hair, everything. He says it's very nutritious for us in so many ways because it has a good amount of fats. He's telling me it has protein, and it's very good for our skin and our hair and everything. And it's in our body really doesn't work hard on it. And and he's also saying in the morning, he's saying that's why it's really good to eat foods. He says if you can, like a pre sorry,
life happens.
It's a telephone solicitor.
No.
But he says that, you know, it's if you can get things that are like, he's saying there is some truth to like pre-digested food. And I'm asking, but he's saying, yeah, something so your body doesn't have to work so hard in the morning. That's why sometimes you get real tired after you eat.
Yeah.
And because your body has to work harder. But he says, you know, like just grab, you know, some fruit or
have a mommy bird regurgitate in your mouth every morning. We're done. Gross. But okay, so are there chemicals that are in what kind of chemicals in foods can contribute, if at all, to weight gain?
he kind of laughs. He's shown me the ingredients, and he's saying all of those chemicals, all of those ingredients that you read on packages that you can't pronounce.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And he says because they're blockers. They block your body, they block your natural parts of your body. And he showed me how it breaks down everything, naturally. All those chemicals in that block your body's ability to break down the foods.
Ooh.
So it can digest and to where you can release it, and he's telling me recycle it, I guess, go to the restroom and that kind of all those chemicals, he said, blocks that. In addition to, he says, he's showing me how it clings to the walls of our body, that creates it to where our body, like it doesn't function as normal also.
Oh wow. Well, it makes sense. They're probably mostly preservatives, right? And that means
Yes. And he says some of those preservatives are pretty toxic.
Yeah. But you know what? It's about the bottom dollar, the bottom line. I mean, if they have spoilage in these companies, they lose money. So.
Yes, he says it is. He says, however, he says, that's the message that people are hearing is that they can't afford it, buy this cheaper stuff. They made it more accessible for us to buy more food for cheaper, and that's the message that we've got caught up in. And he says, but we can buy foods that are healthier for us, and we don't have to listen to that message. He goes, but we think we can, so then therefore we can't. He says, but we can. And he says, but we're used to, and he's telling me, like, we just had a football deal last month, and he says that right there, people bought tons of stuff for the football. What did we have? Super Bowl.
Oh yeah.
Because he keeps showing me a party. The Super Bowl party. He says people go out and buy a ton of food, and he says, and the majority of them didn't even have 2 things in their basket that were not processed.
No, of course not. Oh gosh. Mm-hmm. What other things do companies do that tend to make us overweight? Food companies, people who produce foods. Like any chemical sprayed on the crops, or anything.
Well, Erik says everything just about what they do, because they're so far detached from their primary purpose of why they're doing it, creating these food products. And it's about their mind thought process is to create food products that our bodies will crave and that we'll buy for cheap, and then they stick labels on it that we go, oh, this is all natural, or this is not genetically modified, but we forget about everything else that we're reading. It's something that genetically modified, but he says, but it's got a ton of chemicals in it, preservatives and stuff.
Aren't that some things genetically modified so they don't have to use preservatives and stuff, so that they're like hardier, whatever, plants, etc.? So things that some GMO is good, it seems like.
When you say that, Erik is telling, which I don't know anything about that, but Erik has shown me. He says yes, but as long as they're not putting as long as it still stays a food. He says,
yeah.
because he says we get food and it's not really food. It looks like food, but it's not really food. And he says, that's the problem with a lot of these kids this age. And he's showing me like from 20 and under, like they don't even know what real food tastes like because they've been raised on products to mimic what food is.
Are you talking about Twinkies, Oreos? Now, what are some examples of something that is really to the point where it's really not, shouldn't be considered a food?
Well, Erik says, like Oreos, like you said in Twinkies, because also like that coffee mate and stuff Erik is showing me. And I think, yeah. And I always say it's 2 ingredient shy of plastic. And Erik is saying, he's showing me canned goods of a lot of things, that and box foods and stuff he's showing me. And he's also showing me some frozen meals, it's just chemical. Not real. Yeah. And then he's also showing me things at restaurants, what they're serving you. They present things as a hamburger or as some kind of food, but it's not really that. It's got maybe a 10% of the beef in there, but then it's got a lot of other products involved in there.
And also you think that they're injecting hormones into these animals so they'll be fatter, and they don't let them run around very much so they get even fatter,
Mm-hmm. Yes. And he says,
I'm sorry, does that contribute to weight gain? Ingesting hormone-laden, meats of all sorts?
He says it's how the people who they're raising their herd, are they doing it for, he says to me, some ranchers raise herds, and he goes, he knows that people will probably have a lot of comments. I'm telling them things. That there are ranchers that raise herds with compassion. Mm-hmm. And then there are other ranchers who raise herds for mass production. Mm. Just like, and he's also shown me that with the chickens who lay eggs. Yeah. There's some people who raise chickens in a very humanitarian way. They have free range of an acre or more, of land to run around in. And then there's some that they are in a
cubicle. Yeah. Awful.
Yeah. So it just depends. Is
that even allowed? Oh.
Because nobody questioned it. He said nobody questioned it.
Terrible. So these meats, they create their own hormones of stress. I mean, sometimes they're actually injected with estrogen and all that, and that probably does make us gain weight. But just the cortisol, the stress hormones that are elevated, does that when it goes into our body, does that give us a propensity for weight gain?
He says, he's saying yes, and it also has something to do with, because we're digesting their stuff.
Yeah.
And he also is telling me how that affects our digestive system as well.
Really? How?
Because it's all energy, and we're putting that in us. He says, and he says, so it's
eating terror.
Mm. Mm-hmm. He says it's mindful it's important to be mindful of where you're getting your food. But he says not just that, but just pay more attention to how it feels when you're picking up a package. Like, like he's saying, like we just go into a store numb, picking up stuff. We're not even consciously shopping. He says we're just numb to
Some
it.
People who know how to do muscle testing can pick their food that way. So like you know, your your body inside has this wisdom, this higher self, maybe, I don't know what it is, but you can muscle test like, is my hair purple? And that's a no. Is my hair brown? And it's, or you could do arm, or sometimes some people do it like leaning forward is yes, and leaning forward back
Mhm.
no. So I don't know. Y'all research that because I don't know enough to tell to.
Eric says that's like taking control of the situation. He says, because we do, ultimately, we do have control.
We'll pick this
I'm
up.
sorry?
Like, do I pick this cantaloupe? Okay, put it in the basket.
Mhm.
Looks. Okay, so why are certain races? Oh no, wait, I want to ask too about like Roundup and things that are sprayed on crops. Does that make us gain weight? Any of those kind of things?
Does Roundup and that help you to gain weight? He says not so much as weight gain, but it does affect our bodies to where we cannot process and break down foods. He says, he says, you know,
Some
he says,
cereals, check it out, man. Look up Roundup. Some cereals have traces of it, so you got to be really careful. And I think it's responsible for the increase in the cancer rates in our animals and our pets.
he says there's a link. He says there's a link.
For sure, because there's so much grain in these dog
Mhm.
food. I have mine on what's it called? Taste of the Wild, which is only wild caught, wild raised stuff like venison or whatever, or salmon, etc. What about other things they spray on crops, like insecticides? Roundup is a herbicide.
Um,
Any
he says that he's showing me how they have acreage of stuff. So um, he says, so they have to, he's showing me that they have to spray stuff, but I feel, well, he's telling me that some farmers have gotten to where they aren't as, they're not soaking their crops in pesticides, but they just do a light spray to keep it from going over there. Because he says, it's about money. They're not going to make money. And he says, but there are things that we can do when we buy our produce. He said some things you do want to buy organic because you can't wash it off as readily. He says, but there are some crops that you can soak it in a vinegar-based type stuff and get that pesticide stuff off of it because it doesn't absorb it as well as much.
Pesticides that are organic, like neem oil, that maybe it's too expensive for the farmers. All right, we need to close here pretty soon, but I have just a couple of more questions. We're talking about portion control. There are people called breatharians that don't eat or drink anything because they just
Mm-hmm.
eat energy. I don't know how they do it, but so what do you say about that?
He says those are beans that they, he's making me feel like they're different in a sense, but he says, and it's true, there are more than what we realize that are like that. And he says they fuel and feed themselves from within and from the ground. And when he says the ground, I feel like the earth. And
Wow.
and they he says they just don't have a lot of baggage, the emotion wise. He says they're also very connected. They're very connected to the earth. And he says, the earth will feed us and nurture us and support us without us digesting any of it because it's all energy.
Okay. All right. Real quick, because Michelle's calling me, I have to check on what's going on. certain races tend to be overweight, like Native Americans and Hispanics. Is it because they have more carbs that are not modulated with protein, or?
He says he'll just touch a little bit on this, but he says yes, but it's also due to uh, uh, it is their diet and how they eat. But he says that also has a lot to do with how they were very limited in the things that they were allowed to do to have an income to afford the things that they needed to eat. He says
Yeah,
that's
it's
a
more expensive to eat healthful foods.
well. He said yes, but he says a lot of it is we kind of didn't give them enough room to where they had the ability to buy the things that they needed or wanted. Not wanted, but the things that they needed, the more nutrients. We kind of kept them to the side, so they just made do with what they had, and but it is about their culture and what they grew up on, like the beans and the rice, or the fried foods. He says fried foods is another story.
Oh
But
yeah,
yeah,
I'm sure it depends
and
on the.
he's saying, but it sure is good. It's good.
No, that lard makes those refried beans taste so good. But anyway, so by the way, there's one person that I know of, and we can do this too, that goes to the grocery store with their little pendulum and just checks yes or no. Does so y'all can look at the dowsing rod YouTube that we did. It'll tell you how to use dowsing rods and pendulums. All right, super quick. Last thing. So a lot of it. So we know that we need to eat smaller quantities, maybe more meals a day, more toward paleo. Um, so and try to feel when you're at the grocery store what really feels right for your body. So what do you do if you're overweight because you eat too much because of your emotions? And that's my last question.
Erik says, he says, stop looking at yourself as being overweight, because that creates the self-hate even to grow even more and more. And he says, start focusing on how you're going to love yourself. And each time you take a bite, just know how that's showing your body and everything about you, how much you love yourself. When you eat an apple, he says, stop looking at it as you're beating yourself up and you're not worthy. He says there's a lot of shame for people that are obese.
Yeah.
There's a lot of discrimination, he says, and
Awful.
And they digest that along with everything else. And he says, don't make it about weight loss, make it about loving yourself. And the more you make it about loving yourself, the more you'll start seeing the weight come off, because you won't want to eat a package of cookies or a 20-ounce ribeye. You'll want to eat
something more healthful.
Yeah. Yes.
So I'm sure there's some people, like women, who have been raped and they maybe subconsciously eat a lot because they want to be unattractive to men.
Yes. Yes.
So there's that. But
yes.
so what kind of therapy? I know that Ali O'Shea, apostrophe SHEA, has this awesome self-love workshop that I think would benefit anybody who is overweight. But any other last recommendations of how to love yourself, how to get rid of the emotions that contribute to weight gain?
Erik says you really need to find someone that you can confide in, that's nurturing and loving. And a lot of times that's not going to be a family member because they're a part of the illness per se. But he says you definitely have to find someone that's nurturing and compassionate and loving towards you that you can talk to about this, whether it be a therapist or a healer, or there's all different types of modalities, because you can get healing through acupuncture, through massage, yoga. He says, and tapping is real good, because you don't have to really regurgitate everything in order to heal.
So that's tapping is EFT. Just look up EFT on YouTube.
Yes, it is. I think that in itself is so powerful. But like the workshop, that you said, that personality, he says that is very. He's telling me she's very compassionate. I don't know her, but he's telling me she's very compassionate. You can feel it and hear it in her voice, and she won't leave you. And so I feel like if you pull off a scab that needs to be healed, she'll make sure you're closed. She won't just leave you. And he's just telling me she's like that. She just won't leave you. Yes. She won't abandon you. Yeah.
A lot of people do.
Yeah.
Yep. There's always a way to learn to love yourself.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Denise and Erik.
And that.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's a tough job learning to love yourself. It's real tough. You got a lot of cobwebs to work through, to push away.
That's right.
But Erik says, he's hugging you. He says he loves you, Mom, and he just he's just squeezing you. He's loving you. He says he goes, I just love you, Mom. He just really wants you to know that. And
got a lot of goosebumps on my right leg lately. I know that's him. So
yes, very much so. Yes. How sweet.
Right.
He's so lovey-dovey right now, I'm feeling.
So sweet. All right, Denise at www. Well, I don't want to say www. It's too hard. Anyway, DeniseRamon.com. I will put it here. And I love you. I love you, Denise.
Love you too.
Thank you.
You take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.